Hi, everyone. This is Jason Barrack of Wall Street from Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street from Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a first-time guest, but I followed his work for many years. He is the publisher of the TrendsJournal. Gerald Celente, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Jason.
Now, Gerald, we just have these current events coming out with Hillary Clinton, and, she's had a long track record of scandals, but nothing seems to stick to her. She seems to be Teflon-coated. Why are the prostitutes in the mainstream media letting her off the hook so easily?
Well, actually, they're hitting her on this issue pretty hard. But when you look at it, it's a minor note, and that's really the travesty of it all. How about the war in Libya that she started? I mean, anybody talk about that one? How about the surveillance? How about all of the foreign policy that slaughtered so many people overseas? How about U.S. relationships that have allowed the destruction of the Palestinian people? Not a peep about that. So what they do is they hit on these issues like Benghazi or this one. Are they serious issues? As I said, they're minor notes in the history of the crimes committed by the Clinton family. Whether it's Bill Clinton right after he got elected, bombing Baghdad, to the no-fly zones, to the sanctions put on Iraq when Madeleine Albright, well, not all that bright, was questioned by Leslie Stahl when Albright was Secretary of State. If the sanctions put on by Clinton, the bill, were worth the price of 5,000 dead Iraqi children. And Madeleine said, yes, they were. So this is the Clinton legacy. And you keep going on with this, the destruction of Yugoslavia. Not to mention all the other things such as NAFTA. Everybody loves those HMOs and bovine growth hormones. I mean, I could go on for a day. So what I'm saying, Jason, is the prostitutes went after this, made it a big issue, and like everything else, it's in and out of the news. Hey, how about CIA torture? That one really flipped out real quick. So the crimes committed by the Clinton family run long and deep, and this is only a light one.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, the large bank CEOs, they've done a lot of fraud. They've committed crimes. A lot of them should have been prosecuted for fraud and in jail, like the savings and loan scandals. But them and the people at the top of the government, whether it's Eric Holder or Hillary Clinton, because Eric Holder, there's a lot of evidence that he did a lot of wrong in the Fast and Furious scandal, and so many other people high up in the government, they get pardoned or, they get a slap on the wrist. And it's just, I think you said it awesome. It's not justice for the rest of us.
Yeah, it's just us. We're the only ones that they prosecute us by the letter of the law, and the rest of them get a free ride. Eric Holder's a disgrace as an American, a traitor to the people in the country. That's the clown under Clinton that gave pardons to all his buddies when Clinton was leaving office. They're all despicable people. They're traitors to America as I see them. And you know my motto, think for yourself. And so I don't tell anybody what to believe. I just look at the facts and put them together the way I see them. I mean, this Eric Holder, not one head is rolled on Wall Street. Not one big banker. I had to get a couple of little people, and that's it. And I love the names they come out with for high crimes and misdemeanors. They call them misdeeds, or they misled. Yeah, sure. They robbed us. So anyway, and then Clinton, going back to him, is the guy that destroyed our country by sending our jobs overseas with NAFTA. This is the guy that deregulated the communications industry that now allows, 6 companies to control 95% of it. This is the guy that killed the Glass-Steagall Act that prevented the banks from becoming the criminal operations they've become, and we had to bail them out. What do you think Clinton makes all this dough for? $300,000 for him and her to somebody hear him speak. You could hear their BS all day long for free. It's called payoffs.
Now, Gerald, we obviously, we could go back and forth naming countless examples from both of the political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. There's not a humongous amount of difference between the two, in my opinion. I just think, they just disagree where to spend the loot that they steal from the taxpayer. Are we going to see a rise of a new powerful third political party in the near future?
If the people in this country have any courage, this is the time to do it. I began my career forecasting trends in 1980. In 1988, I wrote a very well-received book called Trend Tracking, far better than Megatrends, Time magazine. And in that book, I had predicted a new third party in 92. And for some reason, I mentioned Ross Perot. Nobody knew who he was at the time. But he was making, he was a kind of a maverick kind of guy. The conditions exist now far greater than they did then. Look what's going on over there in Spain with the Podemos party. Within 1 year, now they're in a position where they could actually win the election. The UKIP party in the UK, Le Pen's party, again, like them or not, agree, disagree, the fact is that all of them have elements that are similar. And in Germany, one in Italy, between the Five-Star Movement and the Northern League, they're all against austerity measures. They're all against the European Union and being controlled by Brussels. They're all opposed to the bailouts. They're all opposed to being in the Euro group for the currency. And they are also anti-immigration, which should not be confused with being anti-Muslim. You take Italy, for example. Because of the destruction caused by Hillary Clinton and the others, including Samantha Powers, Susan Rice, to overthrow Gaddafi, a sovereign nation who did nothing to us, and destabilize the entire Middle East with the wars in Iraq, in Syria, you have millions of people fleeing their homes because of the murder going on, over 200,000 Syrians dead. And where are they going? First stop, Italy. Over 200,000 last year that are documented. So they call it anti-immigration. We can't take them in. You got 40% youth unemployment rate. They're in a recession worse since the Great Depression. So they call it anti-immigration and they put a label on it, right wing. Just like I oppose immigration in this country, because as I look at it, we got 316 million people. We have massive unemployment. We have declining wages. What, are you going to bring in more slave labor to undercut the markets? I've been writing about this since 1986, how the documented evidence shows that the more you bring in, the lower the wages go, and now they've turned the nation into slavelandia. So you could call them right wing, you could call them whatever you want. The fact is they all have something in common. And the common factor is that the reason they're gaining in great popularity are that people are disgusted with the corrupt parties in charge. We don't have a two-party system in this country. That's even a fraud. We got two damn families. If they were Italian, they'd be calling the mafia.
Yeah, exactly. And, they're just fighting over, the loot. So, I mean, they're like two rival crime families or pirates, two rival pirates, stealing the loot that comes out of the taxpayers. But Ron Paul's message seems to be gaining a lot of popularity, the liberty movement. It's not doing that well in terms of actually winning the president or anything, but on the grassroots level, it's resonating with a lot of people. Do you think the libertarian message could potentially be that next third party?
I don't think the libertarian message in itself. You know what I call it? My term is progressive libertarian. You see, I'm a believer of rules and regulations. First of all, this isn't capitalism in the United States. It's fascism. It's the merger of state and corporate powers. Too big to fail has proven that. And capitalism is no such thing. The reason why this was the land of opportunity, among the many reasons, was at the turn of the last century, from the 19th to the 20th, they started putting regulations in place. I mentioned before about Bill Clinton killing the Federal Communications Act, about the Glass-Steagall Act. They also killed acts such as the Sherman Antitrust Act, the Clayton Antitrust Act, the Robinson-Patman Act. These laws were put in place to level the playing field. That's why when I was growing up, there was no CVS or Rite Aids or Home Depots or Lowe's or Staples. There were pharmacies and drugstores. There were hardware stores and stationery stores. They had laws in place that made sure that the playing field was level. And they've been ripped apart. So I don't agree with the entire libertarian movement. I agree with the aspects regarding constitutional rights. You stay out of my life. I won't tell you how to run yours. You don't tell me how to run mine. You know, and the rights of Second Amendment, First Amendment. But I also believe in the progressive elements that, you know, you have a Declaration of Independence and a Constitution because there are, you know, laws put in place. So I think a combination of the two, progressive libertarian, would be the winner for this upcoming election. And I have to say, Jason, the opportunity has never been greater. If they could do it in Spain, if they could do it in France, if they could do it in the UK, and if they could do it in Italy, we can do it. We're the people who the rest of the world used to follow with our revolution and our Constitution.
Now, switching gears, Gerald, President Obama basically won on TV recently, and he freely admitted that there's an economic war going on against Vladimir Putin and Russia. Why do you think the U.S. government and the people who are in power, the political elites, are so intent on poking the bear of Putin and Russia?
I would have to be a clinical psychologist to determine what makes the mind of a sociopath and psychopath act in such destructive ways. And that's all these people are. Sociopaths and psychopaths. If I was on the phone with you, and this is my first time on with you, and you didn't know who I was, but you heard of me, and I said to you, you know, Jason, just got another strike over there in Somalia yesterday. Yeah, we killed a bad guy, a suspected bad guy, and some collateral damage with a drone strike. You know, I'm really good at killing people. You'd say this guy's out of his mind. Well, that's what the president is reported to have said in a book that was published with no denial about his drone strikes. I'm really good at killing people. Listen to the commentary on Fox News a few days ago by this Major General Scales. That's the perfect name for him, man. Yeah, scales of a dead fish. Anybody could look it up. He's saying that the way to defeat Russia in Ukraine, if, of course, Russia does have troops there, and if they do have artillery, because no one's been able to show us one photo, and the ones that they did were from, 2008, and were from somewhere else, he said the way the Russians and Ukraine will lose, if we kill enough Russians and enough soldiers go back to the motherland in body bags. This is a guy that's an American representing us. So what I'm saying is, it's not only the cops. Why do you think the cops have gone wild in this country? The fish rots from the head down. It's murder incorporated. You can kill whoever you want for any reason, any excuse, no judge, no jury, no trial. And nobody cares. So all they're doing is following orders. They're mimicking the rot at the top. So with Putin, we have the whole neocon issue of the belief that, you know, the United States has to diminish the power of Russia so we maintain our superpower status. And anybody thinks that they're going to beat Russia's out of their minds. And Hitler, Napoleon, oh yeah, Obama and Bush, they could have done it. Oh sure, they can't win in Afghanistan. We lost in Iraq. We've destroyed Libya. The United States military has not won a victory since World War II. And they're going to beat Russia?
Yeah, and it looks like the people in power, they're trying to rehash, the Cold War. So I guess there was a lot of younger adults back then, right, who were fighting the Cold War. They were PhDs in Russian literature. I think Condoleezza Rice was. So I guess, they're trying to earn all that money from the think tanks and the lobbying firms around here to go back in Russia and just put enemies, label them as an enemy because maybe they're not doing everything the U.S. government says. I'm just worried, Gerald, I don't know about you, but I'm just worried that this could potentially escalate to potentially World War III.
It can. Absolutely. It's so easy to go to war. The United States is at war now. We're bombing Syria. We are bombing a sovereign nation. Do you realize that the Congress has not declared war since World War II?
Yeah, I do. I just think the military-industrial complex is just running things. So, when there's peace or peace in quotes, like we've installed a puppet in one country or another that does our bidding, it's time to move on to the next country where we can sell weapons and bombs and tanks and, things like that.
Yep, that's about it.
Well,
you look at Saudi Arabia, for example. They're the biggest arms buyer in the world. What do you think everybody went over there and kissed the king's ring for? Yeah. And what a disgrace.
Yeah.
You talk about beheadings. Yeah, I think they're up to 34 already this year.
Yeah, we recycle weapons. We sell them weapons, and they recycle their petrodollars back into the U.S. bond market and invest in the U.S. So that relationship has worked for a while, but I don't know how sustainable it is, given how much dollars are being printed and sent globally. Looks like the Saudis are starting to do partnerships with the Chinese, and they're not trusting the U.S. as much, putting all their money here in this country.
Yep, you're right. Well, it's going to go on for a while, but you see what's going on with these oil prices. You're going to start seeing revolutions in these countries, because that's the way they've been keeping the people quiet, by shutting them up with giving them oil money. And now, as we're speaking, oil prices are, shooting back on a decline again. And this has to do with supply and demand. You're looking at a slowdown in China that's real. China just came out with a line, of course, that we've never heard before, right? The new normal. And just last year, they were saying their GDP would not go below 7.5. Voila. It's now at 7%, and it's going to go lower. So their demand is way down. Copper prices, nickel prices, one after another, because of slowing demand. So you're going to, and ironically, now at TrendsJournal, we cover many more things than what we're talking about. We look at energy and environmental food. I coined the term clean food back in 1993. So we look at over 300 different trend categories. Well, we're really on top of the new energies coming up, and we don't call them alternative energies. We call them dominant energies. And it's you're going to see it beyond wind, solar, geothermal, biofuel. You're seeing it with Toyota now, really pushing the hydrogen-based cars. It's going to happen. Clean nuclear too, using thorium rather than uranium. I'm saying this because, ironically, this is at the same time when there's an oversupply of fossil fuels and a declining demand. So this is the tipping point where you're going to see what would Saudi. Do you think anybody care about Saudi Arabia if their major export was broccoli? So,
yeah, I completely agree. This is a lot of this comes down to oil. Oil is the largest industry in the world right now, right?
I don't know, but I would assume it is. And boy, they're taking a beating. I mean, with these oil prices, one place after another. All these boom towns in North Dakota and all these areas. They're unraveling by the minute. Because when you look at the numbers and what has to be sustainable, West Texas below $50 a barrel isn't making it for a large number of the producers, and not only in the United States, but shale production around the world. So this is really big news because it's signaling, as I said, a lot more than just low oil prices. It's signaling a decline in the global economy. And by the way, you're looking at oil now. West Texas is at $45.11, down 4%, and Brent is down to $54.70. Last week it was over 60. In June it was $115. $115. It's now down to basically $54 a barrel. So again, in the beginning, people thought this is, the Saudis and the United States, to punish Putin. Much bigger than that.
Yeah, and I think the lower the oil price stays, Gerald, I think we're going to see governments potentially collapse. So, Venezuela, I think, because they haven't invested their oil profits properly. They haven't saved a lot of their cash for a rainy day for when there was low oil prices. They never planned on the oil price dropping, and a lot of the private sector oil producers, they're not going to survive. So, and most of the high-paying full-time jobs that were created in the United States since 2008, they've been in the oil sector.
You're 100% right. You're 100% correct. And yep, no, I agree with you.
Well, my next question, Gerald, and you've talked about this a lot in your work, is do you think the middle class is being intentionally destroyed?
No, it's not. It's not that we're being intentionally destroyed. It's an intentional takeover. It's a multinational takeover. That's all it is. And now you're looking with these new trade agreements coming up, the Trans-Pacific Partnership and these other trade deals, the one in Europe. It's just one after another. So what's going on here is that it gives the rights of the multinationals over sovereign nations. So what we're looking at, again, it goes back to the deregulation. And the multinationals are now in charge. You get out of college, where are you going to work? You don't open up your own drugstore, your own hardware store, your own dress shop. There's nothing to open up anymore. You're going to go to work for who? Walmart? You're going to go work for Home Depot, Lowe's, Staples. So that's the destruction of the middle class. That's what I was saying before. So the destruction is that the politicians have sold out to Wall Street. Period, paragraph. Why has the market gone from roughly 8,000 in 2009 to 18,000 now? Because of quantitative easing and low interest rates. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you're a big company, you buy back your stock, you're borrowing money for nothing, and you drive up the price of the stock, and you cash in on it. And why else is the market going up? You could borrow that cheap money, and what does it do? It allows all these private equity groups and investment capitalists, venture capitalists, to do big deals, more mergers and acquisitions. So that's what's happened. That's the other part of the boom. And it's not only in the United States. In Japan, they call it Abenomics. And you look at the real facts. You're looking at the Nikkei up at, 15-year high. You're looking at quantitative easing in Europe from Mario Draghi. Markets over there up at 7-year highs. But in the meantime, the economies are in the skids. So it's not an intentional destruction of the middle class. It's an intentional program to enrich the filthy rich even more. Am I saying that they're filthy rich? Well, the motto again of the Trends Research Institute and the TrendsJournal, think for yourself. According to Oxfam, 1% of the people in the world will own more than 99% in 2016. Less than a year away.
That's mind-blowing in statistics. Yeah, the rich, Gerald, all these quantitative easing programs, that were supposed to trickle down and they were supposed to create jobs on Main Street, or at least that was a narrative what the central bankers and the politicians were saying. Almost all that money that's been printed is gone into asset price inflation, so hedge fund managers can make extra money trading, real estate and stocks and bonds and things like that. And, you can see that in the data with their spending habits. Ferraris are selling and Tiffany's and the higher-end department stores, they're doing pretty good compared to the middle class and the lower middle class.
Oh, yeah. It's, again, look at retail sales in the States. They're down in December, down in January, down in February. Look at real earnings. Again, you look at the Pew Research study that came out about a month and a half ago. The gap between the rich and the poor in the United States is now down to levels worse than it was during the Gilded Age. And another fact is that median household income is below 1999 levels. And another fact is that since quantitative easing began in 2009, 95% of the income increases went to the 1%.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. My last question before I let you go, and you can tell the listeners more about the Trends Journal, has to do with Edward Snowden and other whistleblowers. You know, we hear politicians, mostly from both parties, talk about how they want to reform government and improve it. But when whistleblowers come forward, you know, with facts, trying to improve government and, you know, change it for the better, you know, they're treated very harshly. There's threats on their head. You know, other bad things can happen to them. There's the Gary Webb guy. I think the new movie's coming out, Kill the Messenger. There's so many examples of whistleblowers, you know, not getting respected and fair treatment. What's your opinion of all this?
Well, you mentioned when politicians say, right? You reference politicians. So that means you're referencing two parties because they're the ones in control, the Republicans and the Democrats. To me, they're no different than the Bloods and the Crips. They're murderers, and they're thieves. How many more people do Democrats and Republicans have to murder? And all those, by the way, that put your name on those parties are accessories to the murders of the over 1 million in Iraq on a war based on lies, in Afghanistan based on lies, in Libya based on lies. So how many more murders do they have to commit, continuing drone strikes and continuing conquests and imperialism in other countries? How many more people do they have to kill before people have the courage to say that the people that they believe in their parties, they call Democrats or Republicans are murderers? And how much more of our money do they have to steal in the names of too big to fail, bailouts, in terms of tax breaks, loan guarantees, and special favors before they call them thieves? They're murderers and thieves. So, to answer your question, how can you expect any good coming from the Bloods and the Crips? Of course they're going to demonize and try to bring down anyone that tries to bring out the information that they're murderers and thieves with other facts. So, dogs don't make cats. They're never going to do anything that is in the interest of the public interest. They'll only do what's in their interest. And it goes back to earlier in our conversation. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I don't know what conditions create psychopaths and sociopaths. But that's who you have in government. And when I look at the people running for president, every one of them reminds me of the guy I couldn't stand and girl I couldn't stand in high school and college that wanted to be class president and head of the student council. Every one of them. Little boys and girls, not a man or woman among them.
Yeah, Gerald, I live right outside of Washington, D.C., so I've had to deal with, you know, both political parties and blind ideologues. They're in a complete bubble. You know, they think their economy is recovering and it's doing well just because there's a whole bunch of new construction here in D.C. and there's high-paying jobs for a lot of people here in D.C. with the right connections, and there's all these celebrity chefs here in D.C. that are opening up restaurants now. So they think because those things are happening, they think the rest of the country is doing pretty well.
Right.
Well, I just want to give you some time to please tell my listeners about the Trends Journal if they're interested in signing up.
Yeah, well, the Trends Journal is the only place where you're going to read history before it happens. And when you look at our trends, you could see one after another has come about before anyone was talking about it. And not only do we have the Trends Journal quarterly, and by the way, it's 54 pages, full color, and print or online edition. We have a Trends Monthly. And each weekday night, we do Trends in the News. And we also have conferences here in Colonial Kingston, New York, trend seminars and other functions related to trends. So there's, as we see it, there's no other magazine or source of trend-worthy information available that mirrors ours that comes close to it. And, of course, there's the money-back guarantee. If you don't like it, you get your money back in 30 days, no risk.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm looking over your copy now. You have a lot of interesting ideas there that I definitely don't read in the mainstream media.
No, the prostitutes don't talk about these things.
Yeah, they'd rather talk about lies, I guess, like with what Brian Williams does, and make things up as they go.
Yeah, no, it's sad. And then the other thing too, I mean, how low has the country gone when they look up to a little comedian like Jon Stewart throwing out his stuff? You know, that's how bad the country's gotten. They look up to a low-life comedian.
Yeah, I agree. Satirical news, yeah, people don't really care about the regular news, or they're too busy or don't care. So, you know, if they spend 5 or 10 minutes listening to Brian Williams or Jon Stewart, I mean, that's the top % of people who actually pay attention to the majority of Americans actually pay attention to things, and it's really sad.
Yeah, but I have to tell you, the opportunity for change has never been better than now. The vacuum is so large. Most people really don't believe in their political parties. And now the vacuum could be filled with something really great, a whole new direction. Again, I've been at this, since 1980. I've never seen a greater time for opportunity than now. When people rise to a higher level, that's when it'll change. And it doesn't take that many. I was reading something, I forgot who it was, but they were talking about a revolution. And they said that they did it with about 80-something people, and they could have done it with about 15. I think it was Castro, actually. And that's all it takes. It takes a small handful of committed people on the same page, all interested in the common good, not their personal benefit.
Yeah, and this information war or information revolution, it can occur now over the internet. So it's a lot easier to spread thoughts and share them and things like that, whereas, in the past it was nowhere near as easy to connect with as many people as quickly and efficiently.
Exactly.
Well, I just want to thank you again for your time, Gerald. I enjoyed the discussion about the political stuff. I mean, I've worked in politics a little bit, too, before I started waking up to what was really going on. And thank you for your insights.
Oh, that's great. So you know what it looks like.
Yeah. I've been living in D.C. area too long. I've kind of like gotten very numb to it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thanks again.
All right. Thank you very much, Jason. All the best.